The music shattered against the walls as lights spun over glittering gowns. But the crowd's excitement snapped into silence when the golden-haired prom queen shoved the black girl near the edge of the stage. Her silver heels scraped the floor, her balance faltered, and for a heartbeat, the entire gym seemed to hold its breath. The girl had arrived with nothing but a borrowed dress and a quiet dream. Yet now she hung between humiliation and disaster. And as she caught herself on the railing, something slipped from her clutch that should never have been seen. Something that would expose everything. Before the truth unfolds, make sure you subscribe to Racism Untold Stories for more powerful narratives that reveal the reality many try to hide. Your support helps these stories reach the world. The night did not begin with glitter, nor with applause, nor with the polished perfection that people often liked to pretend surrounded evenings like prom. It began in a small room where the curtains struggled to keep out the noise of the street, and where the hum of the ceiling fan fought bravely against the approaching summer heat. In that room, Amara stood in front of a cracked mirror, carefully smoothing the borrowed blue dress that hung just a little too loosely on her shoulders. She had pinned the straps herself with tiny silver clasps that once belonged to her grandmother, worn now and faintly tarnished, but still bright enough to catch the light when she moved. Her reflection did not radiate confidence. It radiated quiet hope, the kind that grows slowly in people who have spent most of their lives being told to expect less. Her curls were tied in a low twist because the boutique volunteer had said it would look elegant. And her shoes were slightly scuffed because they had been passed through the hands of 4 girls before her. Yet there was something undeniably graceful in the way she stood, as if she carried a world heavier than the dress itself. Outside, a car horn echoed from the street, followed by the hollering laughter of boys who wore privilege like a second skin. Amara paused to listen. She knew that laughter well. It was the same kind that filled the hallways every time someone like her passed with books clutched tightly to her chest. She never understood why those with the most resources seemed to find the loudest humor in those with the least. But she had learned to hold her head still and breathe through it, because breathing was the one thing they could not take from her. Tonight, she wanted something different. She wanted one evening where she could simply exist without needing to protect herself. One evening where the lights could touch her the same way they touched everyone else. Her mother, exhausted from another double shift, had left a note on the kitchen counter early in the morning. A simple message written in careful handwriting. Make tonight yours. That message had sat in Amara's mind all day, carrying warmth she rarely let herself feel. It reminded her that even if the world outside felt like a battlefield, there were corners of her life still lit by love. At school, prom night existed in an entirely different universe from hers. Wealth shimmered in every dress that arrived in glossy bags, and every suit tailored with perfect precision. The gym had been transformed into a glistening golden ballroom, decorated under the supervision of the prom committee, which might as well have been a kingdom ruled by those with influence. Their queen was Brielle Hartley, the girl whose life unfolded with the ease of a story written by fortune. Her father owned the construction firm that employed half the town. Her mother hosted charity galas where diversity meant a decorative theme, not actual inclusion. Brielle moved through the school like the sun, bright and admired, but burning anyone who came too close without permission. And Amara had long understood that she was not someone who was meant to stand in Brielle's orbit. Not because she lacked beauty or intelligence, but because she did not come draped in legacy and wealth. And because her skin, deep and warm like polished ebony, reminded certain people that their world was not as uniform as they pretended. The days leading up to prom had been filled with whispers that slipped through the halls like oil. Whispers about who deserved to be there and who did not. Most of them did not need names. They carried weight through implication alone. Amara felt their sting, not because they surprised her, but because they reminded her that even in moments designed for celebration, cruelty found its way to the center of the room. Still, she pushed forward with determination. She had earned her place at this school with grades, resilience, and effort that far exceeded that of many students who had the luxury of effortless success. The borrowed dress did not diminish her dignity. Her lack of privilege did not erase her right to experience joy. She knew that truth deeply, even while the world around her seemed intent on reminding her of every difference. At the prom entrance, students swept past her in clusters, perfume trailing in the air like soft smoke. Their laughter sparkled as brightly as the decorations. Yet Amara remained at the threshold for a few seconds when she arrived, letting her eyes adjust to the golden glow inside. Her breath caught slightly as she stepped onto the polished floor. It felt like crossing into a world built for everyone except her. The stage, set up for announcements and coronations, stood prominently in the center. Silver curtains framed a raised platform where the prom royalty would soon be crowned. Brielle had spent weeks preparing for that moment, ensuring photographers and committee members were positioned perfectly. Everything revolved around her victory. It always did. Amara spotted a few familiar faces from her classes. Some offered her polite nods, the kind given out of distance rather than connection. Others pretended not to see her. A few stared, not maliciously, but with the same curiosity someone might show when observing something unexpected in a familiar environment. The message was subtle but present. She was out of place. As she moved through the room, the floor felt unsteady beneath her feet. Not because her shoes were unstable, but because she could sense the invisible lines drawn by social hierarchy. Lines that told her where she could stand, where she should not linger, and how small she was expected to make herself. Yet despite that pressure, a quiet confidence rose within her. She carried herself with the poise her mother had taught her. She walked with dignity that had been shaped by years of being underestimated. And even though her stomach twisted with uncertainty, she felt an inner flame, steady and unwavering. Across the room, Brielle noticed her. Single glance, sharp as broken glass, sliced through the crowd. Brielle's eyes narrowed slightly, evaluating, judging, calculating a hierarchy only she understood. Amara felt that gaze land on her like an unwelcome spotlight. It did not matter that this event was meant for everyone. In Brielle's unspoken narrative, some people existed only to highlight her superiority. Amara turned away, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. She had not come to be measured by anyone's prejudice. She had come to claim a moment that life rarely offered her. But fate had already begun weaving a different tapestry. A night meant for celebration was slowly reshaping itself into a test. A crossroads, a collision waiting for its spark. And the spark would arrive soon on that stage, under the golden lights, when a single push would transform a borrowed evening into a revelation that none of them were prepared to witness. The night unfolded with deceptive beauty. The shimmering lights, the sweeping music, and the soft glow of suspended chandeliers created an illusion of harmony. Beneath that illusion, however, tension moved like an unseen current. Slipping between bodies draped in satin and tuxedos, brushing against the edges of every carefully arranged decoration. No one could feel it clearly, but it was there, waiting to surface. Amara walked along the perimeter of the ballroom, her fingertips grazing the soft fabric of the drapes as she observed the swirling crowd. Her borrowed dress glimmered under the shifting lights, giving her an ethereal presence that stood in stark contrast to the unease that settled quietly in her chest. She wanted to belong, to breathe in this moment as freely as the others did. But the weight of watchful eyes pressed against her like an invisible hand. Across the room, clusters of students formed tight circles. Their laughter rose above the music in bright bursts, but behind those bursts lived judgments that did not need to be spoken aloud. Some looked at Amara with curiosity, others with indifference, and a few with a thinly veiled disdain that wrapped itself around their expressions. None of it surprised her, but all of it reminded her that she had walked into a world that had never truly opened its doors for her. The prom committee members moved around the stage with purposeful energy, finalizing the preparations for the crowning ceremony. Silver confetti cannons were loaded. Spotlights were adjusted. A velvet-lined box containing the crown sat on a pedestal near the center, radiating significance. Everything had been orchestrated to perfection, all in honor of the girl who believed this night belonged to her alone. Brielle glided across the dance floor in a golden gown that shimmered like liquid light. Her presence commanded attention, and she accepted it as though it were something she had been promised since birth. She did not see the decorations. She saw the pedestal they created. She did not hear the music. She heard the applause she expected. She lived within a world shaped to her image, and anything that disrupted that image felt like an intrusion. When Brielle's eyes drifted once more toward Amara, a ripple of irritation moved across her poised expression. Amara stood alone near the corner, not looking for attention, yet capturing it in a way that unsettled Brielle. It was not Amara's dress or her presence that bothered her. It was the quiet dignity she carried, the kind of dignity that did not need approval. In Brielle's world, power was meant to be visible, loudly displayed, and constantly acknowledged. Amara's silent self-assurance felt like a challenge. Music shifted to a louder, more vibrant beat. Students gathered closer to the center of the floor, dancing under the sweeping lights. The room's energy grew brighter, but the invisible current of tension continued weaving itself deeper into the night. A strange awareness pulsed in the air, a subtle sense that an unseen tide was rising. Amara tried to settle her nerves by moving closer to one of the tall refreshment tables. She reached for a glass of sparkling punch, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted it. She hoped the sweetness might steady her, but as she sipped, the distant sound of laughter behind her tightened her shoulders. She reminded herself not to look, not to let the noise burrow into her confidence. Yet a familiar ache began forming in her chest, the ache that accompanied every moment she felt like an uninvited guest in spaces that should have belonged to her as much as anyone else. She distracted herself by observing the details of the ballroom. The balloons tied to the stair rails gleamed softly. The soft gold fabric draped from the ceiling moved subtly with the air from the vents. The entire room breathed luxury, but for Amara, it felt like standing inside someone else's dream. A dream she admired but could not fully touch. As she placed the punch glass back on the table, a distant commotion began to form near the stage. The prom committee members were gathering, gesturing to one another as they prepared to announce that the crowning ceremony would begin shortly. A buzz of excitement swept through the crowd, tightening into anticipation. Students moved toward the stage in clusters, eager to get a good view of the moment that would likely be shared across every social media platform by morning. Amara hesitated near the back, uncertain whether she should move closer or stay where she was. Her instincts told her to remain at a distance, to avoid unnecessary attention. Yet a soft pull urged her forward, the pull of witnessing something she had spent years observing from the sidelines. She stepped slowly toward the crowd, adjusting her dress carefully with each movement. As she drew nearer, she noticed that Brielle had already positioned herself near the front of the stage. The golden gown, the perfect curls, the sparkling jewelry, and the flawless poise created an image designed for the spotlight. She stood surrounded by her circle of friends, all of whom mirrored her confidence. They carried a certainty about the outcome of the night, a certainty rooted not in humility, but in entitlement. The crowd tightened. Students pressed closer to one another, creating a sea of bodies all facing the stage. Amara found herself near the edge of this sea, close enough to see the committee members moving into place, but far enough to avoid becoming the center of attention. Her heart beat steadily, though the rhythm quickened with each passing second. As the lights shifted, illuminating the stage more brightly, Amara noticed Brielle glancing back at her again. This time, the glance carried something sharper, almost like a warning. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Amara felt the message in it, even without words. She did not respond. She simply stood still, grounding herself in quiet strength. The moment stretched. The crowd whispered. The spotlight flickered for a second, drawing a collective breath of anticipation. Then something unexpected happened. A group of younger students near the back noticed Amara and began taking discreet photographs of her, not mockingly, but admiringly. Her dress, though borrowed, caught the light beautifully. Her posture radiated calm resilience. For a moment, she seemed to glow. And that glow shifted the energy of the room in a small but noticeable way. Brielle saw it, and something cold settled behind her eyes. The committee chair stepped onto the stage, preparing his notes for the announcement. The room buzzed gently, but an undercurrent of something darker began to form within Brielle. Her jealousy did not appear dramatic or loud. It appeared controlled, precise, and dangerously quiet. And with that quietness came the spark that would ignite the night. As Amara stood steady among the crowd, unaware of the thoughts forming in Brielle's mind, she felt a small sense of hope rising. A hope that maybe this night, despite everything, could still belong to her in some small way. She did not know that the moment she stepped closer to that stage, she was stepping into the center of a storm that had been waiting for her. A storm that would soon reveal the truth hidden beneath the golden lights and perfect smiles. The lights dimmed, leaving only the soft glow of the stage to guide the room's attention. A hush swept through the crowd, rolling from the back of the gym to the very front, as though every student sensed that something monumental was about to unfold. The committee chair stepped into the spotlight, holding the velvet-lined box that contained the crown. The golden trim shimmered, catching in the eyes of every hopeful face. Brielle positioned herself even closer to the stage, her chin lifted with regal certainty. Her golden gown seemed to absorb the light, as though the room itself worked to highlight her presence. She stood with the confidence of someone who had never known a world that denied her anything she desired. Her friends watched her with the same expectation, ready to erupt into prideful applause. Amara remained several steps behind the crowd, but close enough now to feel the heat of the lights as they spread across the room. Her heart pulsed with a mixed rhythm of nervousness and determination. She had never expected to be the center of this ceremony. She had come only to experience the night, to breathe it in like a rare moment of freedom. But as she stood within the glow of the rising anticipation, she sensed an approaching shift. A quiet, subtle shift, like a tremor beneath the surface of calm water. The committee chair lifted the crown from the velvet box, holding it high for the audience to admire. And whispers rippled through the students. The crown gleamed under the lights, a symbol of tradition and power that had always passed through the same hands, year after year. But tonight, that symbol carried a different weight. It seemed to reflect not just beauty or popularity, but something deeper, something raw. Something that would soon be stripped of its innocence. The chair stepped forward, preparing to read the name inscribed on the card. Cameras lifted. Phones hovered. Every breath in the room tightened. Then, everything fractured. Brielle moved. Her steps were controlled, deliberate, and alarmingly smooth. She turned slightly, placing herself in the perfect line of sight of the entire room. Her gaze flicked toward Amara one last time, filled with a cold, calculated emotion that had been building beneath her poised exterior all night. Before anyone could register the shift, Brielle acted. She stepped backward into Amara's path and extended her hand behind her, forming a sudden barrier. The subtle movement was masked by the flicker of lights and the shifting crowd. It appeared innocent to most eyes, but its intent was far from innocent. As Amara stepped forward to find a better view, her foot caught against Brielle's outstretched heel. The world lurched. Amara stumbled, her balance thrown violently off. The gym gasped as her body pitched forward toward the edge of the stage. The lights fractured in her vision, splitting into bright shards. Her borrowed dress tore slightly at the shoulder. A soft ripping sound that seemed impossibly loud against the sudden silence. Students leaned back instinctively, mouths open in shock. Some dropped their phones. Others froze with their arms half raised, unsure whether to move or stay rooted in disbelief. The velvet clutch in Amara's hand flew open as she fell. Its contents scattered across the polished floor like shaken secrets. A tube of lipstick, a folded tissue, a photograph worn at the edges, a small silver frame that held her grandmother's picture, and a single white envelope. The envelope slid across the floor, coming to a halt beneath the blazing light of the stage. Brielle watched it with widening eyes. Shock flashed across her face, but not because of Amara's fall. Her gaze was fixed on the envelope, recognition slicing through her expression. She knew what it was. She understood the danger of its presence far more deeply than anyone else did. Amara caught herself on the edge of the stage, her palms burning as they scraped against the wood. The room spun with gasps and whispers. Her breath trembled, but her composure remained unbroken. She steadied herself, slowly lifting her head as the spotlight washed over her face. In that moment, the envelope remained in full view. Students near the front saw the emblem printed on it, an emblem from the scholarship committee, a prestigious scholarship awarded only to the top student in the district, a scholarship that came with a full ride to one of the most elite universities in the country, a scholarship that Brielle had loudly claimed she deserved, but the envelope carried Amara's name. A ripple tore through the crowd, sharper and more disruptive than any sound the music system could produce. Someone in the front row recognized the emblem and nudged the person beside them. Confusion spread like wildfire. Heads turned, eyes widened. The room seemed to tilt, as if the truth had begun rearranging the space itself. Brielle's composed facade cracked. A thin fissure of panic flickered across her face. The truth was out now, exposed not by a dramatic announcement, but by a simple envelope that had slipped from a borrowed clutch. Amara rose slowly, her movements steady despite the sting in her hands and the tear in her dress. The spotlight trailed her as she bent to retrieve the scattered items. When her hand closed around the envelope, a wave of whispers surged through the students. For the first time, the room was not looking at Brielle, it was looking at Amara. Their eyes reflected a dawning realization. Amara was not simply present at prom. She was the top student, the hard-working girl who had battled through obstacles none of them could imagine. The student who had quietly earned the scholarship that Brielle had assumed belonged to her. The stage lights glared brighter, illuminating the growing cracks in Brielle's composure. Her golden gown no longer seemed like a symbol of triumph. It seemed heavy, suffocating, drenched in entitlement. Then, in a single moment of unraveling, Brielle's earlier actions came into focus. The glances, the tension, the subtle cruelty. The fall she had caused. Everything converged into a single point of clarity that washed over the room like a shockwave. The committee chair hesitated on the stage, his hand still holding the crown in midair. He looked from Brielle to Amara, his brow tightening with disbelief. The crowd waited, suspended in breathless anticipation. Amara stood beneath the lights, envelope in hand, not triumphant, not defeated, but resolute. Her presence drew strength from the truth that had remained hidden for too long, the truth that could no longer be ignored. The crown remained suspended in the chair's hand. The golden night, once shaped by illusion, had shattered, and in the shattered pieces, the real story finally emerged. Silence held the room in its grip. It pressed against every glittering decoration, settled against the polished floor, and wrapped itself around every student as if the air itself had forgotten how to move. The crown in the committee chair's hand remained suspended, a symbol caught between two worlds, the world of assumed privilege and the world of earned truth. Amara stood at the foot of the stage, the envelope still in her hand. The spotlight framed her in a halo of soft radiance, transforming her borrowed dress into something far more regal than the crown perched in the chair's trembling fingers. There was a stillness about her now, a calm that pushed through the chaos created by the fall. She had steadied herself with dignity, and that steadiness had become a mirror that reflected the flaws in the room. Every eye was trained on her. Some saw her for the first time. Others saw themselves for the first time. Brielle stood frozen only a few steps away. Panic flickered beneath her glossy appearance, twisting her perfect features into a mask she could no longer control. Her golden gown no longer glowed with confidence. It clung to her stiff posture like a burden she did not know how to carry. The brightness around her seemed to dim, as though the spotlight itself had turned away from her without permission. The committee chair lowered the crown slowly, uncertainty shaping the lines around his mouth. He looked once more at the name inside the envelope he had yet to read aloud. A name that contradicted every assumption the school had made, every expectation Brielle had nurtured, every whispered rumor that had shaped the social hierarchy. He had been preparing to follow a tradition without question. Now the truth demanded something else. A murmur moved through the crowd like the low rumble of distant thunder. Students exchanged glances, some with shame softening their faces, others with admiration growing quietly within their expressions. The illusion of fairness that had hovered over their school for years shattered like fragile glass. In its place stood a clear, unfiltered truth. Amara had earned her place. She had earned far more than this night had ever offered her. As she rose fully to her feet, she gathered the contents of her clutch with slow, deliberate care. The small photograph of her grandmother lay in her palm for a moment, and the memory it carried steadied her further. Her grandmother's strength, her mother's sacrifices, her own relentless effort, these had brought her here. Not glitter, not wealth, not popularity. Resilience had carried her to this moment. Resilience had exposed the truth without a single word. Students parted instinctively as she stepped back from the stage. Her posture remained straight, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. She did not need a crown to validate her worth. She did not need applause to affirm her strength. She held her dignity the way some held trophies. The committee chair's voice finally broke the silence. It trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a dawning understanding that the night demanded honesty. He lifted the card once more, though his voice barely rose above a whisper. Even without words, the truth was already known. The scholarship belonged to Amara. Her excellence had outshined the decorated reputation Brielle had worked so hard to polish, but where Amara had worked quietly and tirelessly, Brielle had relied on the world to reward her without question. And now that world had turned its gaze toward someone who had earned it. Brielle felt the shift like a blow she could not hide. Her composure collapsed inwards. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. The entitlement that had guided her actions all night no longer shielded her. Her cruelty, once hidden behind perfect smiles, lay exposed before everyone. No spotlight returned to her. No applause sought her. Instead, a hollow ache settled in her chest, one she had never felt before, an ache born from accountability. Amara moved away from the stage, her steps soft but certain. The crowd parted again, some reaching out slightly as if pulled toward her quiet strength. A few lowered their eyes in shame, remembering the countless moments they had dismissed her. Others watched with admiration, recognizing that real beauty had nothing to do with gowns or spotlights. As she approached the doors of the gym, a strange transformation unfolded. It felt as if the air lightened around her, as if the weight the night had tried to place upon her shoulders had lifted. She pushed the doors open gently. Cool night air swept in, carrying the scent of freedom. Stars shimmered above like distant witnesses to her journey. Outside, she paused on the steps, letting the quiet embrace her. Her breath rose in small clouds. Her hands steadied at her sides. She felt tired, but not defeated. She felt changed, but not wounded. She felt seen, finally, not by everyone, but by the truth that had risen from the floor with the envelope she had carried so carefully. Behind her, the gym doors opened slowly. A few students trickled out, their expressions softened. They had witnessed something that would follow them for years, something that would reshape how they judged others, how they perceived worth, how they understood the impact of their assumptions. For some, the night would be a lesson. For others, a mirror. For Brielle, a reckoning. For Amara, a beginning. The crown inside the gym had lost its allure. The real victory had unfolded on the floor of the ballroom in the scattered items that revealed the truth. The moment was not about triumph, but about revelation. And revelation held more power than any coronation ever could. The night did not end with music. It ended with understanding. It ended with truth breaking through glitter. It ended with a question that echoed silently in every heart that had witnessed the fall, the rise, and the transformation. Would they have treated her differently if they had known her worth all along? The stars above seemed to whisper an answer only the future could reveal. If this story moved you, make sure you subscribe to Racism Untold Stories so you never miss the powerful truths and hidden realities that deserve to be heard. Your support helps these stories reach the world.